Need the first slide. Good afternoon. My name is Maria Reidpath, and welcome to the NETL webinar on Fossil Energy's Minority Serving Institutions Program. Next. The objective of this webinar is to assist officials at minority serving institutions by increasing awareness of our historically Black colleges and universities and other minority institutions, or HBCU OMI program, and the available opportunities that it has. Another objective is we are assisting officials by presenting the context of these opportunities, by explaining NETL's missions and priorities in general, and the cross-cutting research in particular. We assisted officials by reviewing NETL's engagement with MSIs and its purpose, and by briefing participants at the intricacies of doing business with the federal government and how to effectively respond to NETL funding opportunity announcements. Next. Some housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the NETL website for you to review again. If you're using computer audio, you may experience audio issues depending on your internet connection speed. To avoid this, we recommend the phone call option, if that works better for you, perhaps. Your telephones and computer microphones are muted, and we will not be able to hear any questions you may have. So please use the chat question box for your questions. That box came up when you logged on to GoToWebinar to the GoToWebinar. All questions will be answered, time permitting, after all the presentations have been made. Questions that are not answered during the webinar will be posted along with the answers at the same location as the webinar recording. Next. So what are the goals of the HBCU OMI program? One of the goals is to reach the intended population, which is the U.S. minority students. Another goal is for minority students to benefit from high-quality learning experience by participating in research activities that impact the nation and potentially the world. Another goal is for the minority students to have the opportunity to present project progress reports and final results at professional venues, thus gaining valuable exposure and experience. And finally, a goal is for faculty, principal investigators to use the research project as teaching tool for minority students. Next. Today's agenda has 4 parts, plus the questions and answers at the end. I am going through the welcome and introductions, and Dr. Sidney Cradle will follow with an overview of the university's training and research program. Betham Young, the contact specialist, will be going over doing business with the federal government and funding opportunity announcements. And Mark Render, a federal project manager, will be addressing how to respond to the areas of interest or topics. And then we'll have questions and answers. Next. These are some, don't forget to put your questions on the chat box. And these are some contact information that may be helpful for you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks, Maria. Hello, welcome again. As Maria said, my name is Sidney Cradle, and I'm the technology manager for Crosscutting Research, the University Training and Research Program. I'm excited and happy to be here today for this 2020 HBCU and OMI webinar. My main intention, as with all the presentations that you'll hear today, is will basically be to provide an orientation for this university audience that firstly introduces NETL, and then just highlights and reinforces the fact that there are research opportunities for you here within this program. For some of you, this may be your first exposure to NETL. For others, you may already have some experience through past projects or other collaborations with NETL. But basically for all of you, I wish to say again, another welcome and thank you for participating today. And I hope this information is informative, relevant, and useful for you overall. Next slide, thank you. So NETL, or the National Energy Technology Laboratory, it resides in the Office of Fossil Energy. And our main objective is basically to develop and mature fossil-based technologies. And when we talk about fossil, we mean coal, oil, natural gas, in a manner that is efficient and protects the environment. In order to provide these technical or technology solutions, our role entails bringing folks together. So we serve as conveners, and this event is one example of that. We generate ideas, and it's our responsibility to also be responsible stewards. So not just from an environmental perspective, in terms of reducing amount of carbon and emissions and things like that, but also emphasizing the safety of people, but also to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars as well. So next slide, please. So just a little bit about NETL. NETL has multiple sites, but we fall under that banner of one NETL, one mission. We have an Albany site on the West Coast that does materials and alloy development primarily. We have on the East Coast, we call it NETL East, that's our Pittsburgh and Morgantown sites. We do process systems engineering, decision science, and that's basically, basically being able to see optimization with competing objectives, essentially how you go about making those decisions. We have the functional materials there, and that can include things like sensor technologies and solvents and sorbents, that kind of thing. And at the Morgantown site in West Virginia, we do energy conversion devices, and that's speaking to things like the solid oxide fuel cells and that whole program. We also have our Joule supercomputer at Morgantown, West Virginia site, and that houses a lot of our artificial intelligence and simulation-based engineering work, and essentially data analytics infrastructure is at Morgantown. And then we have some field offices in Alaska and Texas that serve our programmatic mission, but it's basically just a handful of personnel in those locations. So primarily the main three labs or the main three sites for NETL are the Albany site, Pittsburgh, and Morgantown. Next slide, please. So just by the numbers, as I emphasized before, we have three main labs in the Albany, Pittsburgh, and Morgantown sites. Overall, we were representing more than 900 R&D projects across all of the country in terms of all 50 states. Total award value that's active right now is $6.3 billion. And each year, our annual budget is roughly $1 billion. So in FY20, it was $1.1 billion. That'll float up and down based on congressional appropriations, but that's generally where we are. And then in terms of our workforce, so we're roughly 1,284, so almost 1,300 full-time employees. And the breakdown of that in terms of federal and contractor staff, you can see the split in terms of, of that amount, roughly almost 500 are federal and roughly 824 are contractors or site support. And then we have, we are a research lab, so we have different types of positions and roles in terms of we have faculty, doing sabbaticals and things like that. We have postdoctoral researchers and graduate students, and also undergraduate students working alongside us. And I also want to pinpoint the fact that in addition to research, we also manage and implement projects from an administrative standpoint for other agencies as well. So we have a very robust kind of administrative arm in terms of legal, procurement, project management as well at NETL. Next slide, please. So here's an overview of the FY20 budget. Right now going in, we don't have an FY21 budget enacted yet. Hopefully we'll see that soon. But for FY20, just to give you guys some reference, again, we're at roughly $1.1 billion, and you can see in the pie chart kind of the split in terms of coal and other activities that we are performing. So in the coal program, we have, it's kind of broken down by technology. So we have carbon capture, carbon storage, advanced energy systems, cross-cutting, which I've highlighted here That's where the University Training and Research Program resides, and I'll speak more about that in the subsequent slides. But we also have rare earth elements and transformative power, all within coal. And then, like I alluded to before, we have a very robust project management arm where we do technical monitoring and negotiations and procurement for and technical monitoring for other agencies. So we have for energy efficiency program, Office of Electricity, and also the CEDAR program. You can see how much in terms of project management that we do beyond that. And then we, in addition to coal, we ourselves at NETL, we conduct research in oil and gas. And so you can see kind of the breadth of all the technologies and the kind of the activities that we're doing. Next slide. So like I mentioned before, the University Training and Research Program, which houses our HBCU and OMI program, it falls under cross-cutting research. And cross-cutting research is in the coal directorate. So everything that we do, all the research that we conduct is in support of coal technologies and innovations. So on this slide, you'll see, again, the breadth of the different technologies that we're investigating. And I won't go just at a high level. I just want to share, what they are. So on the advanced energy systems, they're basically tasked with, developing and deploying advanced, more efficient and robust coal-based power technologies. And that includes things like, again, solid oxide program, coal beneficiation, transformative power, which is what we refer to as our the program title for our combustion R&D. And also our gas turbines program. The whole program kind of falls underneath that AES or Advanced Energy Systems box. So there's a lot in that portion. We also do carbon capture. So it's basically the technologies and techniques to effectively capture CO2 derived from our power generation and other industrial processes as well. We also have carbon storage, and that's again, the tools and techniques that are needed to make sure that we can enable safe and permanent CO2 storage, and also explore the use and reuse of CO2 for industry applications as well. I'll circle back to cross-cutting, but just for completeness, so the STEP program, so that basically stands for Supercritical Transformational Electric Power, or STEP. And it's referring to the development and modeling of supercritical CO2 power cycles. So basically, have supercritical CO2 as the working fluid for energy systems that seek to achieve greater than 50% efficiencies, and then have a broad applicability for fossil, but also like nuclear, waste heat applications and things like that. And then lastly here, rare earth elements and critical materials. That's dealing with the extraction, the processing, and manufacturing of the domestic supply of rare earth elements from coal and coal byproducts, which is, again, kind of a critical research area for us at NETL as well. So, and just to circle back to cross-cutting research, so with that, and it's kind of speaking to the name, with all of these technologies, there are a lot of topics or areas that actually cross-cut all of them. So materials, high-performance materials in terms of structural materials and functional materials, work, sensors and controls, that's an enabling technology as well that can cross-cut all of the different areas I just mentioned. Water management, just basically reducing that footprint of water and having the most effective use of water resources for power plant applications. That hits on a lot of different areas within like steam turbines, but also solvent and sorbent type of processes for CO2 capture. And then most recently, we just brought energy storage online. So that's speaking to not just batteries, but thermal energy storage as well, and also hybrid systems using some elements of storage, but also with configured with traditional power generation. So a lot of these, and within that, again, this is where the University Training and Research program resides. So, again, it's a cross-cutting aspect that through our training program with the emphasis on the student development, we can use technology as a vehicle to grow, people essentially, and it's very exciting. So from our vantage point, we see a lot of different looks and a lot of different technologies, and hopefully it's all an effort to innovate and provide solutions for the challenges that we face. Next slide, please. So within Crosscutting, I mentioned the 6 different programs, and of the 6 programs, we have 2 portfolio leads. So everything basically on the left, so essentially sensors and controls, modeling, simulation, and analysis, or also known as simulation-based engineering, and university training and research program, those all fall under me. I'm the main point of contact there. And then my colleague, Dr. Briggs-White, he's the main point of contact, or the portfolio lead for the research efforts that fall under high performance materials, energy storage, and water management. I like to say here, regardless of so even though we are split and we have our direct roles, if you have any questions, or if you have are seeking more information about our program in general, you're feel free to reach out to either one of us, because we can, if it's not me, I can help direct traffic and get you where you need to go in terms of getting answers to anything that you're curious about and wanting to know more. Next slide, please. So the next couple of slides, I just want to do a deep dive on the University Training and Research Program itself. And again, you'll get a copy of these slides afterwards, and I've hyperlinked everything so you can jump to the respective external websites to also learn more. But at a high level, I'm going to give you just an introduction today. Next slide, please. So I like this image. And to me, it kind of summarizes everything in the way I see this program. So at the bottom, so University Training and Research is composed of 2 different programs. One is the Historically Black Colleges and Universities, or HBCU, then also the Other Minority Institutions, so OMI. So it is composed of that program. And the second program is the University Code Research Program. And at its foundation, both of these programs are focused on education and training for the next generation of engineers and scientists. So and what I like to say is from the roots grow the fruits. So from that foundation, again, which is focused in on the students, we use these programs to, number one, we conduct early stage R&D. And then by doing that, so again, kind of technology is the vehicle from which we develop students and engineers, right? We expand the research capabilities of not just the separate labs, but the institutions themselves. So we expand the research capabilities and facilities for your organizations. Specific to HBCU and OMI, obviously we want to, it's a targeted program so that we are more inclusive in order to make sure that opportunities are available for traditionally underrepresented communities as well. But through both of these programs, whether it be HBCU, OMI, and UCR, they both, at the end of the day, help us to create highly skilled and well-qualified workforce, and then ultimately make the U.S. overall more competitive. So that's basically at a glance some of the priorities and the mandate that we have around this program. And I want to circle back to the early stage R&D aspect of it. So if you go to the next slide. So, one of the key roles for NETL is technology development and maturation. We start with we have the initial ideation that begins with a blank page, and we do the world building around that in order to create new technologies and help fossil-based power generation be highly efficient and reliable overall. So from these initial ideas, what we do is we nurture and progress these technologies through the different stages of maturity that we refer to as technology readiness levels, or TRLs. These stages include proving out the feasibility of the concept, You do the initial idea, you have the initial prototyping, validation studies, hardening that prototype, you're optimizing the device, you're testing it out and doing, ultimately, at the end of the day, what we want to do is conduct that technology transfer out to industry by providing viable solutions to whatever the respective challenge is. So a few key points I want to emphasize here is, first is that the new ideas and basically the new innovations, the disruptions, they traditionally and consistently come from the universities. So the University Training and Research Program, I have a note down here of just usually in that early stage R&D, the TRL 2 to 4. And it's just the way of things, the new stuff comes from, and the new ideas comes from universities. And basically all of the researchers, the administrators that are on the line right now, all of you are a part of that. And I just want you to know that, we appreciate the work that you do and the effort that you do every day in your roles at the university level, because basically from our perspective, that's the foundation, right? So, and then once you're at that level, this low early stage level, you're able to explore new concepts and essentially try a lot of things. So there's a lot of, you see just, in terms of these circles representing ideas, you see a lot of ideas at that early stage. And the second thing I want to emphasize here is as a researcher and as researchers and technology developers, not everything is going to progress through these stages and gates. So you can see as you're going through these different kind of gates of maturity, as you're trying to get toward commercialization, it gets reduced and reduced and reduced, because we know not everything is going to progress, right? But the final thing I want to say here is, regardless of whether an idea makes its way to commercialization, there's still knowledge and learning at every step. So sometimes, the product is the knowledge itself. So, but, again, everything starts with, I think, the university level. So that's kind of setting the tone for this university training and research program overall, and how you fit with our larger kind of development in general. So next slide, please. This is our program budget at a glance, and you can see it's kind of historical, going back the last 3 or 4 fiscal years. We, in FY20, I highlighted down below the HBCU and OMI program. We've kind of remained constant for the past 2 fiscal years. We're roughly $2 million a year. But combined, UTR and HBCU program and OMI, they combine for roughly $5 million a year of new R&D that comes online. And it's in addition to what's active at the time. So you can see kind of the trend historically, but kind of where we are. And we feel we're probably going to, who knows what the FY21 budget will be, but I don't expect large deviations away from these, at least the FY20 numbers. Okay, next slide, please. And then just at a glance, we have a very active program, and since 2010, we've made over 104 grants, roughly $33 million. In FY19, because we're sitting in 2020, but looking back, we can only look back at what the previous year in terms of the number of students. But as of last year, we had 105 students active and affiliated with this program. There were 44 in HBCU and OMI, and 61 in UCR. So I think we can only do what our resources allow, but we're constantly trying to improve these numbers. And again, we're trying to invest in people. And if you can imagine, take our investment in terms of their training, integrated over their lives, I think, again, it's pretty powerful what we're able to do. And I want to thank everybody who's involved, even on the NETL side, but the researchers themselves. And with these kind of diagrams, you can kind of see the spread across the different across the country, and where our active projects have come from in the past in terms of just, regionally and in the different states. Next slide, please. So on this, I just wanted to touch on in terms of the technologies, and we'll probably hit it a few times, but the technologies that are represented within this program, again, they cross-cut throughout and touch on many different application spaces throughout coal. And just a few examples include robotics for non-destructive evaluation. So we have active projects right now, and it's so cool. They have everything from drones, aerial drones, all the way through to pipe crawlers on the interior of piping and tubing. So kind of using locomotion and peristaltic motion to crawl inside of a tube. But also we have kind of lizard-based technologies that are kind of gripper tools that can grip and kind of pull, grip, pull, and have some locomotion that way. And there are online sensor technologies on these robotics that allow for the ability to see, microstructural defects and cracks, and also be able to see it in series. Like if you deploy them multiple times, you can see the progression of materials defects as well. So I think it's just really interesting. We also and I'll speed up a little bit here, but water treatment, we've looked at membrane-based methods to separate heavy metals such as selenium from FGD wastewaters. We've also looked at heavy metal detection in coal fly ash as well, such as arsenic and selenium. Most recently, we've also looked at creep-resistant alloys, so basically modeling of heat-affected zones, microstructures for, and being able to try to optimize that. So basically simulation and optimization of grade 91 materials. And then lastly, as an example, and again, this is not the full breadth of everything, it's just some highlights. But we've looked at wireless sensor technologies. What you see here in this diagram is kind of a peel and stick strain sensors for gas turbine application, but also I think solid oxide fuel cell application as well. Next slide, please. So that was just a flavor, and this is a little bit of an eye chart, but basically what it's showing with each of these different colors represents a different technology or a technology thrust area. And I think if my math serves correctly, these are 30 projects active as of earlier this year. And again, it's just showing the breadth of the technologies and I do want to reinforce, the technology is the vehicle that we use to train students. So you can see that the breadth of the student training itself, it covers the gamut. So it could be water analysis, it could be materials analysis, computational materials, things like that, cybersecurity. So just to give the flavors of how broad a range we cover, this is kind of represented in this chart as well. Next slide, please. And this is more of an eye chart, but I just wanted to say, so this, and we'll kind of see it again in one of the next presentations. But these are our FOAs, or our solicitations from previous years, so the FY19 and FY20. And again, it's just further emphasizing the different technology areas of the calls, the topic calls that we use within these FOAs. And as a final thing, and again, I just want to reemphasize, like, we use technology as the vehicle. And when we're developing these topics, we're trying to say, okay, what is the future look like? And what are the skills that will be needed in the future? And so I think as you read some of these titles, data analytics, artificial intelligence, quantum, machine learning, energy storage, these are technology areas that we think that if a student is trained in any of these areas, as we're picking technologies, as we're picking topics, if a student is trained in any of these areas, they can, and they're, they make their way through and they matriculate and they graduate. Number one, they'll be prepared to enter the workforce and solve the challenges that we face. So they'll be able to walk right into a business setting, into industry, and contribute right away. And then the second thing is, these are long-standing, these technologies represent, they're only going to expand and grow. So from a student perspective, I think if they get trained under these programs, they will have the possibility of having long-lasting careers as well, in terms of being able to tie themselves and be trained in technical areas that are compelling and will be here in the future, right? When we talk about technology and the breadth of it, we're also in the back of our minds, again, the focus is on the students. We want them to be productive and contribute, but also, we want to make sure that they have the basis to have long-standing careers wherever they go. So that's it in a nutshell. Next slide. I think I have just one final slide in terms of just opportunities for fellowships. I know I get this question a lot, so I went ahead and included it here today. There are two programs I just want to raise awareness for. So we have the ORISE program, so it's representing Oak Ridge Institute for Science and Education, and I have the hyperlinks there. There's basically postdocs, graduate students doing long-term, it could be 1 year, 2 year, 3 year appointments for research, not just for NETL, but across all of DOE. And then we have the Mickey Leland Energy Fellowship Program, and that is generally a summer internship or fellowship, and that can be, I think it goes a little bit lower into undergraduates, graduate students, and postdocs as well. So just to have awareness, again, you'll get a copy of these slides, and regardless of if, the research projects, there's also just opportunities for students as well. And with that, I think that concludes my talk. Next slide, please. I've listed some hyperlinks that I think are relevant to the program to get you directly to some follow-on information if you want to learn more. And then next slide, I think I have my contact information. So again, my name is Sydney Cradle. And again, it's been wonderful talking to you today. And I hope that it was, again, you learned a little bit more about NETL. You learned a little bit more about our University Training and Research Program. And I look forward to you. Don't hesitate to reach out if you want to learn more or have any additional questions in the future. And I just want to give a shout out, so to speak, to our headquarters director for this program, is Bhima Sastry, and that's his contact information as well. And that is all. So with that, I'll go ahead, and that concludes my presentation. And if you have any questions, go ahead and put them into the chat box. And at the end of all the presentations, time permitting, we will answer questions on this recording, but we will also try to provide transcripts as well in the archive when everything gets posted. So again, thank you. And without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Bethany Young to talk about doing business with the federal government. Go ahead, Bethany.
Thank you, Sydney. Hello, this is Bethany Young. I'm the contract specialist in finance and acquisition center for at DOE NETL, and I'm going to talk to you today about the funding opportunities, and they're also known as FOAs. I have two sections. And the first section I'm going to cover is just over like a general FOA, and then the second section I'll talk to you more on a specific FOA for the University and Training and Research Program. It was also known, which Sydney just covered, so I'm not going to cover too much on it, but in case I do happen to say HBCU or OMI, which is the Historical Black College in universities, and also the other minority institutes, or also the University of Coal Research. So can you turn to the next slide, please? So in the first half, I'm going to cover, I'm going to navigate you through the processes for the FOA and the stages that the key requirements that you have to pay attention to, and what is required. And I'll guide you all the way through registration requirements, and then prepare and submit your application. Can you turn to the next slide, please? And this is just a definition of the funding opportunity announcement. And so it's a publicly available document by which a federal agency makes known its intention to award grants and cooperative agreements, usually as a result of the competitive competition for funds. And so there's other terms that represent, depending on the agency or the type of program. And so the second bulletin kind of covers some of the different names that you might hear. But here at NETL, in the Financial Assistance Award, basically we deal with grants and cooperative agreements in a competitive manner. And so to your right shows an example of a cover page of what our FOA announcement looks like. The next slide, please. So with registration, it is a very important note to make that you must be registered in all of these 4 systems in order to submit your application, because they all kind of intertwine or intermix together. And especially you want to register in FedConnect, because that is where you would submit your questions, and that's where you receive, if you get selected, you would receive your award and any amendments or modifications to that award. Next slide, please. There are 3 steps to this process, and basically an email is sent to the e-business point of contact that's listed in SAMS when you register, and then you use like a PIN that you would get from the SAM registration, and there is you would have like one person that would be the point of contact that would be able to receive or send anything through FedConnect. Then, okay, and Grants.gov is where you would submit the application in the package. Next slide, please. So when you register in FedConnect, you're able to submit questions to the contract specialist, and they'll be able to anything that has to do with the FOA, and then we would be able to answer your questions. And it's very important that if you're not registered in any of them 4 that were on that list before from the other slide, that you at least give like 44 days to complete the entire registration process, because there has been where it's come up to when the applications are due and you don't have a registration yet. So please give yourself time to get registered in all 4 programs. And next slide, please. The Grants.gov has a support number and also a support email address. So if you have any trouble with the registration process, they're able to help you with any issues. Questions related to the content of the announcement must be submitted to the FedConnect portal, and that is where the CS comes in, and I can be assistance because I will receive the questions through my email, and then I can respond. And that way, any questions we can, I can redo the question that I can send them out to the rest of the applicants, so we don't get so many of the same question. Next slide, please. You must download the application package with the forms and the instructions at Grants.gov. Completed applications, they must be submitted through the FedConnect or the Grants.gov. again, you must be registered at both in order to download or put in your application package. Next slide, please. On the main page of FedConnect, they also have search opportunities, which it shows in this where the arrow is pointing. That's where you would click and be able to, if you have your FOA number, be able to search by FOA number. And I think if you go to the next slide, yes, if you go to the next slide, it shows you what brings up. Now you can search by the issuing office, and in this case, we brought up these are all the notices in the funding opportunities for NETL, and then you just click on the link, and that would bring up. And I think maybe the next slide also shows you. I'm too down. Yeah, it shows you what happens when you bring up one of the opportunities. And actually, it's the next slide. There we go. Okay, so then this is FOA number 2001, and then it will show you that in that folder, it has the main FOA, and then if there's any attachments, it has all the, your budget attachments or anything else that pertains to this particular FOA. Next slide, please. And then in FedConnect, it shows you the first arrow shows you where there's a help screen that you can get assistance to help you navigate through FedConnect. This is important because I don't see this particular end. The contract specialist does not see this particular end, so it kind of helps that you talk to FedConnect themselves, their help desk, because they'll be able to guide you through. Also, it shows you where the sign-in is for your after you register, and then if you haven't registered, it gives you an opportunity where you can register. Right, select that button. Next slide, please. Pretty much this is like the same. It gives you the links to FedConnect and Grants.gov, and that's where the proposals will be accepted through either one. And the additional information can also be found at NETL's business website, which, if you want to take note, there's the website, and it has the list of all our FOAs that are being that have already been initiated. And then the next slide has my information, which you could visit NETL's DOE.gov, and then you also can Twitter or Facebook, and then it has my contact information. So it gives you all the information on NETL. Okay, and next slide. Okay, so this is the second part that I was talking about. Can you go to the next slide, because I don't have one. Okay, I'm at the right one. Okay. So this was the second part that I was going to talk to you about, and this is for a typical FOA for this particular program. And the FOA, it contains, it says 8 main sections, but it also, if you include the appendices, that's 9 sections. And this is like very important to keep in mind, that you pay attention to each section, that it offers guidance in how to create a responsive application. Because one of the things you don't want to do is do all that work and then have it be thrown out. Can you go to the next slide, please? So this is where the funding opportunity announcement starts. It starts with like a background and description of the FOA. It gives you the objectives. Some FOAs have areas of interest. This particular one that is soon to be released will have areas of interest, and I believe Mark will be talking to you about them in the on his presentation. Also, it's, again, I cannot stress to pay close attention to the sections, so that to avoid submitting all your work and then have it be a non-responsive application. And later on, I'll discuss different things. In fact, it's the next slide. So if you go to the next slide, I'll discuss some of the certain things that you should really pay attention to. First is I wanted to say mainly to pay attention to the maximum DOE share, and that you do not go over that maximum amount, because if you do, your application will be rejected. So please pay attention to these sections that show, you know, the estimated funding, the numbers of awards, and that's usually in the beginning of the FOA. Also, pay attention to point of period of performances, because in some cases, and especially in this one, we're going to have, I think it's one of the area of interest is only going to be 24 months, and the rest of them are going to be 36 months. So whatever area of interest that you're going to look into, you want to make sure you have the correct month. Next slide, please. This is something I also wanted to say. It's something that just came up. We are now having national labs that are permitted to apply, especially for the HBCU as a subrecipient, but not as a prime. And national labs are typically not fully funded at the project start. So please keep this in mind when you're creating your budgets for the full project period. We used to carve out the cost, and we no longer are doing that process. And then so that just changed recently. So it's really important to make sure that you read your special terms and conditions and actually read the whole FOA, but the terms and conditions too, because this is a new term that we are doing with the national labs. So that's why, you know, things change constantly. So that's why it's really important to make sure you read everything. That's the cost sharing. With the HBCU FOAs, they're not required for cost share. We do have a cost share waiver, but it is allowable. So if you do want to provide cost share, you're welcome to. And let's see, next slide, please. Applications will have to meet each of the specific formal requirements under this section. So if you do not comply with everything that's in this one section, and you will be kicked out or disqualified for all your work. So and it addresses such things, and as like the Adobe, using an Adobe or a certain type of format, PDF form, or the certain size of font. That's important to know. Your page limit, your line spacing. Certain ones might be single, certain ones might be double spaced. So you have to definitely, this is, cannot stress this enough, to pay attention, because any of this, if you don't read it correctly and you say you know, single space everything and you were supposed to double space it, then, you know, if you go over the page limit or anything like that, you will definitely be kicked out. Your application will be kicked out. And this is all because of we do this because of fairness and to give everybody a, you know, equal opportunity. Because if we allow one person that doesn't, you know, follow the guidelines, and you know, so it's not, you know, we have to keep it that it's fair for everybody. So if you get kicked out, there's really not a lot that we can do if you didn't follow the guidelines or the requirements. Okay, can we get a next slide? Okay, the SF424, that is a form online, and that is usually the first, when as a contract specialist, that's the first form that I look at, because it gives me all the information regarding your proposed project. And in this document, which is the HBCU and OM eligibility document on the last one, it's especially important to please state if your educational entity claims that your HBCU, which is Historical Black College, University, or other minority institute, the eligibility, there's usually a list online that shows you who the universities are, and that you provide a copy of that certificate, and that you mark it too. So we're able to know that you are applying as an HBCU or OMI participant. Next slide, please. Project narratives, they can include this whole list that is shown on the left-hand side. And then this just kind of gives you an idea in the FOA of what it kind of looks like. And then on the right-hand side, it tells you to pay, you know, close attention to the formatting. So here, for an example, the project narrative must not exceed the 25-page limit. So, and also you should have 1-inch margins and double spaced. So this is what I was talking about. If you do it single spaced, it's going to get kicked out. So this is like very important to watch. And then on the left-hand side, there, where it shows all of the lists, if you notice the references do not count as the page, as the 25 pages. And that's kind of in the middle, I believe. Yes, in the middle part where it talks about what's not included in the project narrative page limitation. So there are some that are included, and then there's some that are not. So, but you can't go over that 25-page limit. And if you have like any questions, you can always, you know, submit your questions and Fed Connect to me. Next slide, please. Here's some more pointers on the narrative. And the narrative, of course, is the main part of your application. And so there's some pointers here, you know, to be clear and concise. Again, I cannot stress it, to follow directions so you do not have your application rejected, and it can just be rejected just over one, one miss or one simple mistake. And again, it's all because of fairness, so that every application has an equal opportunity. Next slide, please. A key item to remember with the project summary file is that it cannot be publicly distributed, so do not include anything that's proprietary or business sensitive information. So that's a very important item to remember. And also the project management plan, this shows you typically what it includes. And again, be mindful of the requirements. Next slide. Under resumes, make sure that the PI is an employee of the submitting prime university, and no sub-awardees, they should not be the bank PI. That's really important to remember. We just want the PI to be, they have to be an employee of the prime university. If you have any sub-recipients, they cannot be the main principal investigator. They could be a sub-principal investigator or a co-principal investigator, but they cannot be the main principal investigator. So that's very important to remember. Next slide, please. If you're planning on providing cost share, we just asked, like on the budget information, that you separate the federal and the non-federal share, and in the different categories. And also to make sure that you add the cost basis in your budget justification. If it's a quote, if it's actual salary, if it's historical cost, we need to know that, and we need to know how your budget is set up, and what the cost basis for each thing is. And if you do have quotes, if you could include the quote in your with your budget. Next slide, please. Okay, this section will detail the merit review criteria that the application will be judged by. So each merit review criteria should be addressed versus the information within the application. So if you get to the next slide, it shows, okay, so the different FOA sections, this is where you could find the information. So if you're certain sections, so it's really important to also look at the table of contents, because it will tell you where it will title the sections, and it will also tell you what's under each section, those under sections. It's important that in the appendices that you provide the important templates. There's important templates that you should follow and download to develop your application. And I think that's it. Yes. And next slide. Does anybody have any questions for me? Okay. If there's no questions, I don't see any. You can always email me, and there's my contact information. And after that, I think Mark is up next, I believe. Mark Hunter. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending, and thank you for listening to me this afternoon.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Render. Thanks, Bethan. I'm a project manager on the Enabling Technologies and Partnerships team. Just to recap, Bethan presented an overview of the FOA. My presentation is going to focus specifically on areas of interest and responding to them. AOIs, I'm going to call them throughout this presentation. They're in the FOA and they describe the technical work the proposals are to focus on. Next slide, please. The main objective of the HBCU OMI program here at NETL is to educate and train the next generation of engineers and scientists to fill critical fossil workforce gaps, while providing opportunities for traditionally underrepresented communities. We want this program to provide research opportunities for as many students as possible. So in your proposals, please try to identify student roles when possible and how they'll contribute. Last, keep in mind that the AOIs cross-cut many different technology areas. You can see a few listed there in the last bullet. I'll show you the AOIs over the past few years in a couple slides. Sydney showed them to you earlier as well. Next slide, please. Areas of interest. These are the topics themselves. When you submit a proposal, you'll indicate an area of interest that you're submitting to. They can be found in the FOA, the Funding Opportunity Announcement, and are usually half a page to 2 pages in length. They'll describe in detail an area of research that we are seeking proposals for. They're what we want your proposal to focus on or what we want your work to complete. The quantity and the topic of the AOIs may change annually depending on multiple factors. The AOIs pretty much change every year, although there are some recurring themes. Often the AOI will also tell you what we are not looking for also, so pay attention to that too. Next slide, please. So these are previous areas of interest. You can read through these yourself as I quickly go over them. None of these FOAs are currently open. All of them closed months or years ago, so please don't try to write a proposal for one of them. They're just examples to give you an idea of what to expect. We're interested in a lot of different areas. They change yearly, but you can notice a few themes. They're all based around fossil energy research. Next slide, please. This slide is very wordy, but it includes an entire area of interest from last year's FOA. This AOI was titled Novel Sensors and Controls for Flexible Generation. The first paragraph is mostly background information, and there's an animation on this slide. Clint, could you click, please? There we go, thank you. And just a reminder that this is not an active area of interest. This next paragraph that you can see, I'd like you to pay attention to the highlighted segments. Like this topic seeks novel sensing controls concepts for, or for controls R&D, proposals are sought that do this, or for sensing R&D, measurements of interest include. This text is telling you exactly what your proposal needs to focus on to be considered responsive and to be successful. The last sentence in this paragraph tells you what concepts will be considered non-responsive and what won't be evaluated. And then the very last sentence on this slide lets you know an additional requirement, that a technology maturation plan will be required as a deliverable. But that's what an area of interest looks like in a nutshell. They're very straightforward on telling you exactly what or what not to include in your proposal. Next slide, please. Okay, so just some tips on responding to FOAs. Once you've figured out what area of interest you wish to apply to, read the rest of the FOA carefully. It includes the instructions for your application, so make sure that you understand the FOA's contents well. Back to the AOIs, read the language closely. It's very important that you structure your proposal to meet all of the requirements listed in the AOI. And finally, using a recycled application, it's not a good approach. The AOI topics can be pretty specific and they're all fossil energy based. So it's best to just start with a fresh application. Next slide, please. Try to get organized early. That'll only help. Figure out who will be in your project team and what their roles will be. You can include other institutions too, though you should consult the text in the FOA for requirements. You'll typically need to include a letter of support also, but everything's in the FOA, all of the requirements. Make sure that you indicate how team members will make your team stronger if you are including other people in your team. You should be teaming up to improve your proposal and strengthen your team. It'd also probably be helpful to develop a schedule with some key dates on it. In the bottom half of that slide, if you have any questions about an FOA, you can use FedConnect to ask them. Your questions can ask for technical, administrative, or general FOA clarification, but you can't ask for advice or for comments specifically on your technology or other things that could give you an unfair advantage. All submitted questions and their answers are made available to anyone that has a FedConnect account. Next slide, please. Okay, some more tips, and I think this is also the last slide. Make sure that you figure out everything that you are required to submit. Many different pieces make up your application, like the narrative, the abstract, the project management plan, budget justifications, and other files. If you miss something, your application could be disqualified or scored lower. All of the requirements are given in the FOA. For example, Bethan used this example also. Let's say an FOA gives a page limit for the project narrative and states that the font must be double spaced. And if you meet that page limit criteria, but you single space the font, your proposal will probably be thrown out. So please read the FOA carefully and make sure that you address all the requirements in it. You can see this as making sure you address the cake prior to the icing. First, you need to read the FOA and AOI requirements and address them. This is baking the cake. After your cake is perfect, then you can focus on the icing, which are the extras. Don't focus on those extras until your foundation, the cake, is complete. Once you've done that, then you can start to add in all the items that will really make your proposal pop and stand out. So last, most importantly, and really to sum up the entire presentation, make sure you submit all documentation and make sure that you've met the requirements for each file. And next slide, please. And that is all I have. My contact information, as well as Sydney's, can be found in the bottom left of this slide. Thank you. Sydney?
Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. And I want to thank you, special thank you to Mark Render, who just finished this presentation, also Bethan Young, and Maria Reidpath. And behind the scenes, I want to thank Clinton Newsom and Jordan Hall for their kind of technical support for this program. At this time, I think we were going to try to ask and answer questions. I'm receiving a note. I don't think, I feel like we received a few questions about whether the slides will be posted, and the answer to that is yes, they will be posted. We will give us a day or so to get it on our external website. We'll also, again, this event has been recorded, so we will put it up on YouTube, and we'll have hyperlinks to that when we post a copy of the slides. And I think at this point in time, I don't think there were any other questions at this time, but I hope you guys saw along the way that there is contact information for us all. So feel free, if later on something you're curious about or you want to know more, you feel free to reach out to us anytime into the future. And at the end of the day, like I said, I hope this was a productive event for you in terms of knowing more about NETL. And you can see we even got into the weeds a little bit in terms of what constitutes an application, like what is that package, what does it look like, and then we also gave you kind of advice and tips in terms of being as strong or creating as strong a proposal as possible, because again, we see excellent ideas. But sometimes we see applications score low because there's not an attention to detail, and sometimes the instructions that we have aren't followed. So we wanted, hopefully you heard the recurring theme of just essentially just follow the instructions and pay very close attention to everything, because we know all the work and hard work and effort that goes into preparing these proposals. And again, you don't want to be rejected or considered non-responsive based on something that you think is trivial, but for us, we in effort of fairness, we want to make sure that we treat all the proposals under the same requirements. So we don't make special considerations or accommodations, for folks that can't or aren't following the instructions. So that's the main theme. But as these presentations are posted, hopefully it gives you can refer back to them in the future as you are putting out your or creating your proposals. And then in terms of one question I always get about the program is, okay, well, when is the next FOA? When is the next solicitation? The answer to that is we generally follow the same cycle every year, and it's roughly around late fall, early spring when our FOAs get released. And again, the topics are they vary year to year. And generally, it's on the street for 6 to 8 weeks or so, and then that leaves proposals are usually due, end of late or early spring, essentially. So this is around that time. So just be on the lookout, and hopefully you'll see something soon. And again, every year we follow the same cycle, so you can look for us around the same time frame every year. With that, I don't think we saw any other questions. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is adjourn this meeting and conclude our program. And again, just say thank you to everybody who joined us today. I really appreciate it. And again, I wish you well into the future. Maybe our paths will cross again. And again, thank you for all of your efforts. I know in terms of student training, it's more than just teaching students, it's mentoring, it's office hours, it's a lot of hard work. So again, we appreciate the work that you guys do. And, just onward, right? Just continue what you're doing, and hopefully we'll, again, cross paths in the future. Have a good rest of the day, and I'm going to go ahead and close out this program. Thank you so much.